Nothing?
I can't sign it anymore.
Take it back then.
Okay. I'm not on the finance committee, so I can't
Let's
sign.
fly.
Morning, all. I've just got two things before I'll send it over to Nate and Ashley. One is just an update on the commitment, which I've been doing the last few weeks now. So we've, I'm very confident that by next Friday the 15th, we'll have the data entered, all the pieces from Larry and the assessor's side into the system. We talked about a previous meeting on but the 110 properties is down to about 30 now for the final kind of assessment piece. The 40 land swaps, or land splits, I should say, are finalized. The RV park pieces have been finalized. Personal property has been finalized. So it's these last kind of 30 more complex type pieces, parcels that are in their final assessment zone. So we expect to have that by the 15th. Thank you to Sue and Nate, our clerk and IT department, who also does a lot of the kind of processing of the bill after it gets put into the Vision software, final assessments in there. Once I have that, I'll also have the new valuation piece, what portion of the tax commitment will be with that, waterfront, non-waterfront, existing total property valuation increase. I know, Michelle, I'd like to get your input on that piece, because once we have that on Friday, we could ask some questions about these, kind of where this comes from. I know there's some questions you have there on how these determinations are made. There's some questions I have too. I don't have those because I don't have the data yet, but want those, and so we can finalize those bills. It takes about a week and a half for Sue and Nate. They already have a great memo, kind of outlines every step of that process on when they receive the information, how they spot check individual bills, and kind of finalize it to go to circle printing. We also have, but with that, we're looking at the end of August for sending it out. That's earlier than last year. It would have bills arriving in people's mailboxes before they're due, but not with 30 days before tax would start accruing, which I know, Steve, I think you made some excellent points in the last meeting on that. Really needs to be the standard. So we're coming to this city council meeting with discussion and potential action on both moving the tax date and the interest accrual deadline. I think we'll still be getting out the bills earlier than last year, and I think from a cash flow perspective, from what I've seen from the analysis, like when those bills goes out, there's a fair amount of mortgage companies, other folks that pay right away. They don't wait until the last minute to pay it. So from a cash flow perspective, I don't think it'll really change our net position and reliance on the TAN, because the bill will actually be going out earlier. We should be getting, so it really is just when you get that bill, the deadline is different, and you'll have 30 days before interest would start to accrue. So those two things would go hand in hand. So that's likely going to be my recommendation. I'll have more at the actual city council meeting in a couple weeks, so that when people get their bills, Citizen Ellsworth has 30 days to pay it from the due date from when they actually get their bills in their hands, and that should be a much better customer experience than what happened last year, where the bill goes out and technically the deadline's already due, and we've said social media posts and news articles on, well, the taxes isn't there. Like, that was unacceptable. So I think we can avoid that this year, get the tax bills out a little earlier. We've hired a consultant to help, so Larry's in the office kind of really inputting and fine-tuning the data. That consultant is going out as a certified assessor, works with Orland and a bunch of other towns in Down East, and doing a lot of the final remaining field work and the more complicated pieces to put into the Vision system. They have a ton of experience here. So we're really kind of full tilt on getting these commitments out. We're meeting twice a week with the assessing code teams. The code teams actually went out and did about 40 of the more simple kind of measurements on new expansions. So our new code officer mentioned, I guess in Tennessee, they use drones for some of these assessing pieces. So I'm curious on that. He said it wasn't exactly the most friendly customer experience. So I know the IT department's interested in acquiring a fleet of drones to do assessing, but there is a piece of this too, of an after-action report. Now that I know a lot more on the blocking and tackling here, I think we're going to make it kind of standard operating procedure for our code department to when they're doing certificates of occupancy, that they're, if they can, doing the final measurement there to get it back in assessing, but also a monthly tracker and basically reconciliation of new permits over the last year that have come in, existing permits, and, you know, constant monitoring of kind of how that backlog is progressing every month. So we have a check-in across departments on just what the size of that backlog is. So we're not waiting until April 1st and then going from April 1st forward. So ideally on April 1st, you have a much smaller backlog to deal with. I don't really, from what I can see, anticipate needing to be much later than June 1st for being able to close out the prior years, because April 1st of that year is when all of the new permits can even come through. So April 1st is closed out. There's no new acquiring from April 1st on. So just like with the budget process, we're meeting next week with the management team to do an after-action report now that we've had an internal team meeting on the budget and what we can do better for next year, and then we'll come to council to kind of talk about that as well. Same thing for this tax commitment process. You know, I really feel like we can optimize this so that we can send out the tax bills at their appointed time, maybe even send them out a little earlier so that if it's due by September 15th, you know, you're getting it on August 1st. That's, or maybe even by, you know, July 15th, a full few months with a lot of leeway, so it helps their cash flow. Especially, I think, the TAN reliance in the more zero interest rate market was a good policy prescription. The higher interest rate market, you know, while they're, you know, I think it's less of a financial, yeah, it's more expensive. So every time I think about that and spending that money on TAN interest, could go to the parklet, could go to the Milton Park, could go to these other pieces. So over time, I'd hope that our reserve funding, getting out the tax bills earlier to help our net cash position could also limit reliance on the TAN. So that's kind of the update on commitment. I apologize again. I should have caught this a lot earlier so that we weren't in a reconsideration of a motion on the tax deadline. But I'll pause there and just ask to see if there's any questions from Steve or Michelle. Okay.
I have a question, and I don't know the legalities of it. I'm sure there's a lot of government muscle that is involved in this, but at what point do you measure the assessing at a more broad level to expedite that and forego some of these little idiosyncrasy taxable items? You know, it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like this process is you're combing with a fine-tooth comb. At what point do you loosen that regulation up a little bit and comb with a little broader comb and miss some taxable opportunities, but yet streamline it for everybody?
And Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the assessor is essentially an agent of the state, and it's an extremely regimented process on how that goes. So unfortunately, this isn't one that.
Loving situation. Okay.
Yeah, there's
I somehow I guessed that, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we can't change the rules all that much because it's a
right.
state.
I just wondered. It seems like that the city, and maybe I'm wrong, that it's just so rigid, but yet at what point do you lower those standards and become a little more flexible? And sure, you're going to miss taxable opportunities, and I don't think that's such a bad thing. There's got to be a way to lower that standard in some degree, because right now, even though that degree is, you know, the standard is way up here, I promise you that there's many things that were in violation of this high standard.
Yeah, I can look more into that piece. I think one of the, from my review initially, and I'll need to do more of the after action part. Like, you know, I'm full tilt on let's get these bills out, let's make sure they're accurate, let's get a team together to get everything assessed. But is that a monthly reconciliation process, better interactivity with code. We'll be able to get to that. Some of the personal property and these other pieces, like we had those were more like smaller pieces, really just the new commercial, the new, you know, these are much complicated pieces.
It's new construction.
Yep.
So, because as, like you said, as occupancy permits are given for people for the houses and construction is completed, you do the measurements there, it goes into the system, and it happens year-round. So the only thing is that you have to worry about the most is on April 1st, that's the deadline for the assessment. So any new construction, if it isn't finished, he's required to assess that property at that point as of April 1st. So what has been completed at that point. And so it's all of those permits and everything that code enforcement keeps track of, that's what goes to him on April 1st. And then he has April, May, June to go back and
That's as long as
assess
he
those.
wants, apparently.
Well, so that's the hard part. Everything else should be done pretty much year-round as it comes, and, but-
Yeah, it's really that, what's that backlog that you have at April 1st?
At
But the
April
thing is,
1st, yeah.
because of certificate of occupancy, so like a lot of the permits have closed before then. So there could be a fair amount that you're already done with. Now, some,
Yeah.
you'd want to hold off until April 1st because, you don't want to assess halfway through the value and they create more, but a lot of that, so there should be
It's completed and occupancy and everything, and nothing else is being built on there.
right.
But it is, I mean, the other thing that, with Larry is the only assessor for a city of 91 square miles. I mean, you look at like Lemoyne, and, has an assessor, and these small towns all around have an assessor. So, and it may be that there's just so much growth and so much, new construction and changes to old construction and new developments that it is hard for him to keep up, and maybe that you hiring someone to help him out is not a bad thing. Because it's a big city, it's a lot of land, it's a lot of parcels for one person. He doesn't have an assistant assessor. He has an assistant, but he doesn't have an assistant assessor anymore, does he?
Yeah, that person's getting certifications now, so she can do
So she
some
can
certain
help.
things like personal property and others. But the official certifications and like the skill set to do the math basically on these pieces to do the assessed value is something she'll be learning over the next year or so. And
But, because it's also, I mean, he looks at sales to make sure that he's not under-assessing or over-assessing someone year-round. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just new construction. New construction, I think, is the hardest, probably. I'm speaking for him, and I probably shouldn't, but I don't think I think he's very well could be overwhelmed at some pieces of this, but.
yeah, so that's this is the hardest time of the year for me too. I know the last year was my first time with this. I hate sending out the tax bills. It's
I know.
just
It is awful to send them out, and it does hurt it definitely does hurt our, and I think you're handling it, wonderfully, of getting him some help and getting this taken care of ahead of time, but.
yeah, and a team effort with code and everybody else.
Yeah.
Although I am, 2.9% is the levy, but we'll have, once this final assessment piece goes, how those distribution goes against waterfront property, non-waterfront property, different valuations, we'll have in, so we'll at least know those pieces as well. I just got my tax bill from town of Castine. It was a 13% increase, and a pretty substantial valuation piece that I'm interested in now that I know more about this, on like how my house went double in value in a very small period of time. But my taxes have also gone up pretty substantially, so the mill. I'm curious now. Unfortunately, I have some more of the background for it, but 2.9% at the kind of inflationary level, and trying to keep within that over the next few years, I think is going to be important. But I don't like any increase, and I think being on the receiving end of it hasn't been great, and giving it on the sending end was part of this job that I didn't quite expect. And also, I noticed in the Castine tax bill, I was like, well, what was last year's bill? Like, how does this compare to the previous year's bill? Some information I'm gonna have to follow up on. And I might look at the form and structure of our bill just so we could have more information on just this is what your tax bill was, this is what it was last year, just so it can be a little more
Do we
transparent.
have that?
There's probably no room to add another thing,
Okay.
based on what we legally have to put on there, and it is, we're squeezing in things, making them smaller so we can get them in there.
I might add an insert. I don't know. We talked about it for the fire. For the fire department, they have some strategic planning stuff. I don't like to necessarily send things out that aren't relative to the tax bill itself. Like, hey, sign up for this form, do this information pamphlet. but I could see something on just a little bit more of an explanation where you can find more out about the budget, the finance processes, transparency, because we do have all of that online now if people want to know every single piece of the budget. So
They can see their last year's bill.
see their last year's bill. So just a little bit on like how this tax rate is defined. I know when I got my bill and it's just like, here's the bill. It's like, geez, like what was this to last year? What was I have these other questions? And so look into that a little more too. Last piece is, we're having a meeting with the judiciary and our own teams on the kind of final design of the courthouse road area. I know we talked, I think it's last Friday, about it was the workshop on clerk of the works and putting out the whole project out to bid upon final design. Now, again, the final initial design is really for stormwater and for DEP submission, so it's going to be a few more weeks after that once we submit to DEP for a final design that we can send out to bidders. But I think I should and can move forward on the clerk of the works piece, just to maybe even help lead that RFP from the get-go. I think that's from council thus far. I've been hearing some amenability to that. Obviously, it will increase costs a little bit to have that individual kind of independently managing that process, but I also think it'll contribute to government transparency and to Steve's points a couple of times on just catching some things that may be more valuable on a larger scale than if trying to manage it all in-house from a bunch of other people. So we do have sufficient funds in the local road improvement account that we could potentially pay that consultant out of, and then look towards the next bond cycle as a band to have funds if we, for pieces of it that we might have to draw down on for the construction road access, which is the first piece that's really due by January, February of next year, is the construction road.
I thought we weren't doing a construction road.
Well, the Myrick Street is going to become a construction road for,
Oh,
I'm sorry, Merrill Lane will be,
Merrill Lane.
yeah, we're not doing a separate one, but this,
Oh, okay.
this needs to be construction road capable by that time. However,
Gotcha.
prior to them building the courthouse and trying to do one half of the road, then the other half of the road, there might be a strong impetus to just, except for the paving, let's get the water, sewer, power, those pieces, and just do a construction road plus in the near term while there's no courthouse activity for building that $55 million structure. So we can kind of,
That makes sense, I'm sorry. I just
no
was like,
worries.
wait a minute.
So yeah, I mean, we have sufficient funds in the local roads account if we want to just meet the bare minimum of what the state's going to need to start building their courthouse. We, if we wanted to kind of limit costs this year, we could just, cut down the trees, grade it, use fill from the highway department to get it, put some culverts in to give it to construction road ready for, and then, contract out for some electricity to be on poles straight to the courthouse, keep it minimal expenses this year, and then go towards like a finalization of the road in 2027, early spring timeframe. So that's probably the cheapest in the near-term option, but operationally, it might be just a lot better to, hey, while there's no courthouse road or courthouse construction for that $55 million project, and we have the whole place to ourselves, just finish this, as much of this work as possible. So that's the real kind of key.
Seems like it'd be cheaper too, because you're gonna have to pay for those poles, and those aren't cheap either, so you'd be adding to the full cost, right?
Yeah, and there's a piece of this too where, while you're at this point, it's not that much more expensive from what I'm told to bury because the whole road's opened up, and this
Right.
is like the last time to do that. So, and the conduit and then the utility connection fees for future developers would basically pay back those electric fees to
Right.
the city over time. So it might just be, while we've got a dirt road, while it's opened up, let's get the water, sewer, electric
I
in.
think that makes a lot of sense.
And then let the state for the next year and a half do what they need over it. And then the final piece is we add the sidewalks, we add the paving once all the construction's happened, the water, sewer, electric's already there. It'll probably help spur initial development in that area too, because they know that water, sewer, and electric's there. They're not going to wait until 2027 for those utilities to arrive. So that's kind of what we're thinking, but also having a clerk of the works will take a little pressure off me too on this piece, but also be able to be a little more dialed in on all those things and not getting taken away on other projects that we move towards. So that's it for me before I hand it to the finance team.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ashley and myself, we got a few things going on for sure. One big thing is finishing off the FY25 books, making sure everything's accurate so we can look at the encumbrances that the department heads have reached out to us about. making sure that we have the funding available to encumber funds. So that's a process that we're pretty much complete with. I just need to finalize, like I said, the FY '25 books before I make sure, like I said, everything is good to go. We did have a meeting on Wednesday with Sue Lassard, retired city manager from Bucksport. I may or may not have likened her to the Pope in my eyes, but she's great. She's going to be a huge asset for us for the time that she's going to be, just consulting with us. And I'm super excited just to have her, honestly, decades of knowledge and wisdom that I told her I'm going to try to sponge everything I can off of her as possible. But she's going to be great to work with. I'm super excited. I think she's meeting with the department heads next week. So, like I said, I think anything we can gain from her is only going to make the finance department even better. So I'm super excited about that. We have the band that we are turning into a bond. I think I emailed the committee last night in regards to the term as far as we have the $2.1 million worth of roads, we have the plow truck, and we have the Surrey Road water main. And my question I was going to propose to you guys was, what length of term were you guys hoping to see from this bond? I just wanted to get back with the Maine Municipal Bond Bank to ensure that we all are in agreement on what the length of this bond should be. And I didn't know if anyone wanted to ask or open up any questions, but that's kind of what I wanted to check with you guys on, so we can get the proper length that we think is best suitable.
Can you tier those?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, we can tier them, and that was one of the things I asked Tony at Maine Municipal Bond Bank is about tiering them. And I asked her, I said, well, when do you need to know? Because I already submitted the application, but I want to make sure that we can tier those the way we want. And she said, I'd love to have that answer by Monday, like this coming Monday. So that's why I was like, well, let me bring it up and discuss it today, if possible.
Nate, what's in the bond?
So we have $2.1 million worth of the road work. We have the plow truck, which was $275,000, and then we have $200,000 allocated to the Surrey Road water main. Those are the three pieces of the bond.
Michelle, when you talk about tiering, you mean different, thanks Steve, different time duration, right?
Yeah,
So we
like-
could match them to the effective life of each
Right.
investment.
Yeah.
So a road, a road, if it's a complete reconstruction, could be 20. The water mains could be 20, because you won't replace
Yeah.
those, but
But a
that
plow
truck
truck should not be 20.
Should not be 20, because you'll be replacing that long before 20 years.
Why is a truck in a bond in the first place? That's my question.
Because we voted it during the budget. We
Yeah.
agreed to it. Because it's a $200,000,
And it's over $250,000.
it's over $250,000.
Yes, I agree. And my thinking was exactly the same as yours. I was thinking 20 years for the roads, 20 years for the water main. But then when you're talking about, plow truck, you probably only want to do 5-7 years max. But
That plow truck is fully equipped. That's including the equipment that goes on that truck.
I don't know. My anticipation is yes, but let me ping Mike. I don't want to give you the wrong answer there. So I'll. Do you know that, Nate? If the plow truck is fully equipped, I imagine so. It's not just for the vehicle itself, right?
yeah, I believe it's the full, as I say, kit and caboodle. I think it's the whole thing, but I'm not 100% on that.
So the front, the wing, all of the internal controls.
Yeah.
Then, I guess what I was, they're not taking it off another truck and putting it on there.
No. Definitely not that. And I'm 75% that's the case. But
Let's go back to the 200,000 for the Surrey Road. Is that for extras, or is that for a planned project expense?
As far as I know, that's for extras.
And were the extras gonna
Extra.
last as long as the project?
What does that mean, extras?
I think it's the contingency
Well,
that we went over,
Yeah, I think it was just the contingencies.
Overruns, in other
Yeah.
words.
the overrun, so it's really, I mean, it's the whole project. The contingency was, but again, if, I need a little more information there before we can,
Yeah, I think we, so is it, are we doing it's for the, we're doing the project under one loan, and then we need an extra, borrow an
Yeah.
extra 200,000 for
Yeah.
the project, right? So it's
Yes,
not.
that's correct.
Okay. Because we wouldn't be bonding contingency, that would be part of the ban, and then you bond for everything at the end. But if it's, because then you're borrowing money for something that you may or may not need, so you can't really bond for that. So.
Yeah.
can we get the details of these, Nate, sent
Yeah.
along on everything that's in this ban and expect, we did that for
Yeah.
the initial process, when we had some notes in there, so that way Michelle and Steve can kind of see the,
$2.1 million for roads. That's the resurfacing that was done this year? For the
Yes.
most part? That's not a 20-year
No,
project,
It's not
folks.
construction.
What?
Yeah, you're right, that's not
That's
construction.
not a 20-year project. And the 200,000, so there's no way in hell that you ought to be financing a skim coat of pavement for 20 years. And the $200,000, my guess is cost overruns that was not planned or not enhancing the life of anything. My understanding is there was all kinds of problems with sewer in the basements of people, and is that any part of this?
again, I don't know. The contingency overrun, you know, it might be the increase in the project, but.
What's the life of the water pipe in the ground, 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, we have water pipes in the ground that are 75, 100 years old right
Yeah,
now.
we're-
And that's the thing. We also have roads that haven't been repaved in 30
We
years.
have a line that has to be
so
replaced
we-
after 20 years, we got a problem.
There are a fair amount of roads that we haven't repaved in 20 years.
And as far as the
so-
truck goes, I don't agree with the bond period, but that's beside the point. I think that ought to be financed at a local bank for its useful life. But it doesn't matter if it's a full plow truck, a part plow truck, bits and pieces of a plow truck. There is no way in hell that it's gonna last more than 7 years. Or we should be debt servicing it or more than 7. I would be in favor of 5, because at 5 years, you start a higher maintenance regiment than you do when it's new. And having payments on a truck and a high repair bill on a truck shouldn't be in the same window of time.
Can you get us a list, Nate, with their expected
Yeah.
life, and then
I'll send out
details on these pieces?
We created an excellent book back in November, and I'll send you a book of all the things that we had on this, this ban, and like I said, you guys can look it over and get back to me.
I mean, it sounds like we're in agreement, figure out what the useful life is of each investment, and that the bonds should not exceed.
But it sounds like
Is
you
this a-
need
Is this a
time.
ban or a bond that you're
This-
doing through the bond bank?
It's converting the ban to the bond.
It's
Okay.
converting the ban to the bond.
Okay.
So, and again, and especially looking at other ones, there is no like 12.345 year ratio to this. So it is going to be a, you know, a general piece we have, and you have the debt service schedule on how many 30-year bonds we put out before, 20 years. I think there was a couple that were less than that. I'd like to see the debt service schedule maybe sent out again too to the group, just so that they know. Because yes, there is the useful life of the piece of equipment, but there's also the financial capacity of the city in determining those bonds. I don't think, you know, while I know that's clearly in listening to the council, that is a policy that you would like to kind of have the bond be in somewhat of the useful life, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the bonding for these projects is really also allowable to be in the financial capacity of the state. It's not required to be matched exactly to per the bond ordinance or something like that. We're allowed to bond for these projects beyond their useful life, depending on financial capacity for the state, or less than their useful life for the financial capacity of the city now.
I can give you my opinion. I know you want one by Monday. 2.1 million is for road resurfacing, which it sounds like that's what that is. $200,000 for the Surrey Road. We don't know what, if that's for repairs, additions, or whatever, but the useful life is probably longer than the pavement. And the truck, you know, 5 years is certainly, shouldn't be more than 5 years, but sounds like you need an answer quicker than we're talking about here. My position would be a 7-year bond, period, across the board.
Steve, can I just,
That's fine.
help me understand how you land on that? Not disagreeing, want to understand it.
Well, $2 million in road resurfacing, I think it should be 5, but obviously, I don't want to slow down the resurfacing of roads. I think that if, we got plenty of roads in town that hadn't been touched in 12 years, so
Right.
7 years would seem to me be a happy medium on the resurfacing. I would like it to be 5, but we don't want to slow down the rebuild of the roads that haven't been touched in years. The $200,000 sounds to me like it's cost overruns relabeled, and sounds to me like that water project is probably good for a solid, hopefully, 20 years. And the truck is a 5-year deal. So if you put everything together and make it clean and simple and not layer everything, and, in 7 years, I would think that the road pavement, 7 years is aggressive. The $200,000 Surrey Road thing might be a 15-year value, but the truck is no more than 5, so I'm coming at 7 years to make it simple and easy. If you're gonna bond this thing and stop all this layering, I would think the whole thing, the extra value in the Surrey Road and the lower value of the truck, that's where I'm coming up with the 7 years.
I'd also note that we're catching up on a fair amount of deferred maintenance here on these roads, that especially at this level. So it's, this is basically for a lack of investment for previous years. So to add that much 7 years of debt service on that limited time to make up for the last 6, 7, 10 years of underinvestment for this piece too. It's not just the useful life of these pieces, but for the fact that we had to do so much just to get caught up with things that had previously should have been done for the last 5 to 7 years.
Continue to play
So that's where the
catch up.
financial capacity and future growth, like we go with that, we're going to have to, that's a decision to, raise taxes next year pretty significantly. That's the other financial component that I think should be considered as we're moving forward.
The only thing that's not a 7-year life is this $200,000. That's the question. Pavement's not gonna be more than 7. And the truck isn't gonna be more than 7.
Or we'll get the detailed information here and then
Yep.
we'll come back. We're gonna need to push back on that Monday deadline, Nate.
So I think that one of the things, if you can, Nate, let's look at the debt service payments too, because we don't want to make the debt service payments so high that we
Yeah.
can't ever do anything through the capital improvement program and on taxpayer incentive borrowing. So we do need to think about that also. This is where, when you have your capital, you have your debt service plan and you have your capital plan all together, you can make these decisions much
Right.
more easily and more informatively of how it is for
Yeah, and
for the future payments.
And
in
I
the
do have
future.
I do have that chart and stuff like that. I'll send it out with with the details of all the things, so you guys can look at that as well. And that's obviously a concern, and I agree with you, Steve, just so you know, I agree with you as far as the length and terms. It's just more of looking at the next, 5, 10 years and what our debt payments would be in that case. But I'll definitely send all that information out right after this meeting.
You
for sure.
shouldn't have debt on a wore-out asset.
That's all I got.
When are we gonna see the audit presentation from the auditors at the finance meeting and also at a council meeting?
The goal is the end of this month. I haven't finalized the day because I'm just trying to coordinate and make sure that we have time to look through the audit ourselves, but the goal is to have it the end of this month. And I will hopefully have a date for you by next week.
So if that's
Sort
the
of.
case, perhaps a presentation the end of this month and the full council on the September meeting?
Yeah, if that's what you'd
Does
prefer.
that,
Sure.
does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
I think it's important that we have that presentation in a full council meeting, so everybody sees what's happening. And I know that there's all kinds of stories about, things didn't go quite as you wanted, things aren't looking quite as good as we thought. I know there's all of that backlash, but laying the truth on the table and looking at how far the finance department has come within 18 months needs to be recognized. Just because you may get a black eye in this audit, doesn't mean it's not the best audit you've seen in 5.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it might be one of the. It's 2024, so
Whatever, I mean.
2025 that just closed out. I think will be the best in 5. I think 2024 may be one of the worst because
Okay,
that was
whatever.
9 months into my arrival, and like it's
But laying the truth on the table is better, and learning all of these problems is better.
Yeah.
Than brushing them under the carpet. I'd rather walk on a flat carpet than a hump.
I think we're all in agreement with that. It's the matter of timing. And again, with that acknowledgement that this is again looking backwards at, before significant changes were made. So,
Yeah.
again, I think we're all in agreement. It's just a matter of what the timing is to get it ready and right.
oh 100%. I think
Yeah.
I feel like we've been pretty transparent thus far on all
I've
these
never heard a
pieces.
recommendation of hiding it. It's just a matter of time. It took forever to get it, so now that we've got it.
Well, that's the accounting.
get
rule.
rid- Right.
Yeah.
But-
So, but 100% agree, Steve. The transparency is really the only way forward, and I could see this, especially this finance. There's a the recommendations in there, but some other pieces on maybe how we keep a slot of this process now that we have Sue Lassard coming in to kind of really do our policies, procedures, so that this doesn't happen again institutionally with the organization. So.
Let's not take away the
Yeah.
progress that's been made.
Agree.
And I did want to mention really quick, is going back on transparency, just so the city of Ellsworth is aware, if you go to the city's website, the July financials are posted there as of this morning. So that's visible for all to see. I sent it out last night. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to print them, but those are available, like I said, for review as well.
Great.
That's it.
Did I miss a review of the budget versus actual? Are there any?
Oh yeah, is this big finance?
That's what he was
Yeah,
just saying.
I didn't bring them up. Only because I didn't print them and I didn't know who had a chance to look at them since I sent them very late last night. But you guys are welcome to ask me questions if you have any. But they, like I said, they are posted on the website, and we can discuss now, or we can even discuss next Friday if you'd like.
I think, Nate, just the regular question about, are there green flags, red flags? I've only had a chance to look at the revenue, and I don't know what to make of it. So you've studied them? you're
Yeah,
living them?
no. Looking through, I definitely don't see any red flags. It's all about timing, and since I've been with the city now for a year and a half, I kind of get a sense of the timing now more than I did a year ago. But I feel like everything's kind of tracking in the right direction, and I don't see any red flags as of yet. When I pulled the expenses out, only a few departments are slightly over the where they should be at this time of year.
Yeah.
But nothing significant. So.
Okay.
Maybe if we get those printouts for next week, I'd love just to see
Yeah.
see them too.
Yeah, that's fine.
With the group.
Nate, when you do your monthly allocations, do you do do you do trends, or do you just divide everything by 12?
I just divide everything by 12, but I know that some things obviously are quarterly, so it doesn't necessarily match the trends of, we're 10% of the way through the year and you're 15% over,
Right.
but, so yeah, I don't necessarily do it like that, but it's
We
a good
can-
way to see things.
Well, I recall that's a goal for fiscal year '26. Like we've made, at least now we have actuals last year and this year to compare.
Oh, exactly.
So next year,
Yeah.
trying to budget when we actually anticipate it versus divided by 12 just makes it a more valuable document to measure where we are.
Yeah, and Ashley and Nate
Exactly.
and other Nate are going to go out to Utah to where Cassell's at for some more intense training on Cassell's products and features. But I believe there's a function too where, now that, to your point, Nancy, what we talked about last year, there's like some data visualization pieces, and you can see like the revenue streams by month and kind of how they peaks and valleys there, and spending streams as well. And now that we've been in the same software and are not just using Excel sheets to toss around, but we're tracking everything through the software, we're building the budgets in the software, we'll have, we'll at least be able to look through last year's actuals at the same time by department and maybe just be able to pull those up. So,
That's gonna be so much more helpful than a 22-page spreadsheet
right.
to try to.
The spreadsheet gets really helpful towards the end of the year in terms
And
of.
it is the details, it's got value, but if you're
Right.
looking at, okay, how are we doing, what are the trends?
Right.
Those are hard to pick up,
Great.
because we just keep getting better here.
Getting there.
I might
Yeah.
throw out just a little different view on the trending. It's impossible, there's gonna be, until you get halfway through your year, it's impossible for that data to be concerning, because there's gonna be expenses that pop up in a certain month that are just gonna blow that theory out the door. But as long as you're in a 12-month compartment, that may correct itself in the future months.
Yeah.
At least you know you've blown it out, though.
And-
It's a value.
True, but it's, some of it's
Doing trends and
impossible.
putting
like-
things.
Like this, there's a big payment to
I'm
Gorham
almost
Savings Bank.
Argue.
Yeah, I think talking to Sue about this too, I think she, we'll talk to her soon. I think she'd probably disagree in that, and especially hearing her kind of institutional knowledge. When you stay with something, I think Nate and Ashley are already getting this. You know it so intimately that when your debt service payments hit, when your this hits, that you could see those trend lines. That like it is like extremely predictable on where departments go, on where your when your revenues come in, when are these other pieces, and then so you can start noting aberrations in the data and be like, hey, like wait a second, we're not supposed to. That shouldn't have happened yet, and then it can trigger you. So at least in talking to Sue, we had a conversation like that, which is one of the importance of having the team here for a longer period of time and getting fully trained and getting to know all these systems is, and tracking them month to month. I think you're right. In the first couple months,
I'm not against, to speak to that, I'm not against the data. Data's great, but, and seeing where it goes sideways is valuable, but you can't pound on the panic button if you're not at least 6 months in.
yep. Should we open it up?
I think that's a great idea.
Good morning, Jared, resident. I was just curious if you could, maybe I missed it in a council meeting, but the RFP for looking at rewriting and redesigning the TIF districts and what the actual like the goal for that is, if we're gonna be like rewriting it to spend the money towards certain projects, or what the thought process of spending the $35,000 to redesign and look at the TIF and what the goal is.
Yeah, so there's, first piece is we didn't have any bidders at the 15,000 level, so we increased it to hopefully encourage some additional bidders. We also did a lot more outreach, so, to generate some proposals, so so hopefully we'll have a piece there. I think it's detailed in the RFP as well. It'll be likely a kind of multi-stage process. One is, the editing of the TIF districts that happened multiple times before and to kind of be in current economic development needs. We had a fairly substantial drop-off on some debt service on a road that's created, more of a surplus in the unallocated spending from year to year that TIF, current economic development TIF, funds the economic development department, a little bit of the city manager's office, and then has some defined activities. There's a lot of things relative to Myrick Street that it was kind of designed for equipment proration and other pieces that haven't come to fruition. There's other things that we might, I think are probably for higher use and recreation. There's a downtown TIF portage district that is mentioned in the current TIF that would need to be created in order to allocate sources and funds to the downtown area. So there's sort of an initial with the TIF funding hasn't been allocated, and we're starting to, let's let's be able to free up that funding for council to decide where to spend it to highest current economic development use needs. And then there's a second piece of that, and that could be like an activation of the TIF district and editing of the TIF. And then the second piece of that is the potential creation for new TIFs and analysis of like where we're at. I think we're at like 2.5% of land mass and areas that could see some additional development over the next decade, particularly the courthouse area, maybe the waterfront area, the potential new creation of TIFs and potential credit enhancement agreements that those could go towards as well. So that as the valuation, we've had a lot of valuation increase over the last 5 years. I think from a $1 billion valuation from the state to $1.6 billion. It's a good thing for especially if it's new growth to limit kind of the taxpayer burden and hopefully have a reduction of the mill rate over time. But then as you continue to grow like that, and this with that level of growth that continued and a continued drop at the mill rate, could also trigger a revenue sharing decrease from the state. So being able to essentially sequester some of that growth and I equate to like kind of tax-free, make the money tax-free from the state's perspective, so it doesn't jeopardize the revenue sharing. And then also there's a cutoff date or a sunset date for the current economic development TIF. So I know Michelle and Tammy did a really good job of planning for how that sunsets, and it goes from I'm just going to throw numbers out here from 80 to 70, so it sunsets off. So there's not a huge cliff where all the things you were funding you now have to find new taxpayer dollars for or sunset them completely. So potentially how a new TIF district or a couple new TIF districts could, help over time, bridge that cliff effect so that we don't have those issues with our budget.
Jared, if I could respond to that a little bit. My view has always been get rid of it altogether. Stop playing favoritism of areas. It's a bunch of foolishness. We ought to get rid of the TIF districts, period. There's a way you can do it. I've talked to Augusta at length about that. The money goes back into the general fund, and it stops all this favoritism. Everybody gets treated the same. That's my view.
I can't. So here's the other piece of that. So this does help the city because it lowers our valuation. So it prevents the state from giving us, bigger cuts in our revenue sharing, but also our school subsidy payments.
Oh, yeah.
And some other things. So that's the biggest reason to do it, and it does not show favoritism. What it does is, this is a plan that's very detailed, very well thought out, and should go along with our comprehensive plan. It should go along with what we're seeing for the future of the city for the next 10 years. And what it does is, while it's sheltering that money from our valuation and protecting our revenue sharing and our school subsidy, at the same time, you have to make sure that the projects that you're using that money for are capital projects and are not something that we're going to have a cliff effect, and then once we're doing these projects, they're like one-time projects. They're not for operating, they're not for, anything that's going to be a long-term payment, right? Mm-hmm. So because once it's done, you don't want to still be paying for it and then having to have the taxpayer suddenly pay for it. So it's very, very well thought out. As far as credit enhancement, so that's where you give a person part of their taxes back. Right now, the city only does that for low-income housing and senior housing. I'm not going to say anything about that because I personally don't believe in credit enhancements for those types for that. But that's just my opinion. But the other pieces of it, the money is going into the city and into city projects that are not being paid from your tax bill. It's getting paid from an evaluation that's been set aside. And so it actually reduces the cost of projects because you've got the cost of the project, but you've also got that revenue that you're sheltering that offsets the cost of those projects. So it's much, much more than favoritism or anything else. It's actually a very, very strategic plan on a very strategic way of saving the city money and getting specific capital projects done without having to budget for them every year or borrow for them and pay interest on top.
It's a bureaucratic slush fund, in my view.
It is absolutely not.
So I guess
you've got both sides of it. You can make a decision.
I guess the
but-
direct question is we rewriting the TIF district to pull the monies down to
Yeah, so-
put towards the track where there was the discussion about walkability and how the track doesn't consider from certain people's standpoints, I guess is where I was going.
So that's something for the council, and that won't be done, I'll be gone by then, but what happens on this plan is, you know what you want to do for projects, you know where you want to put the focus, and the council will decide if that's exactly what they want to do. So it's should be a good discussion about what goes into that plan. And then the other thing is as redistricting for the city happens, so when we're creating neighborhoods and you're rezoning, and you're looking at areas that you want to develop, for example, like the business park or the industrial park, if we want to encourage people to go in there for the TIF district, and that's where we're going to put our efforts, I'm not saying credit enhancement, but that's where we're going to put our efforts, then you would TIF that, for the city's sake, you would TIF that area, because you know that's where your evaluation is going to change, and you want to protect that. So,
And I would just echo what Michelle is saying, when it's targeted and well-designed, it's described as the single economic development tool that communities have, and we're looking
communities-
to update it and use it wisely.
exactly. In communities, we're held, we're not allowed to have a sales tax, we're not allowed to do
Right.
anything. We bring in the economic development, and the state reaps the benefits of that.
Right.
So this is one area that we can really take advantage, that can help the city, again, protect itself with its revenue sharing and its subsidy, but also do a long-term planning for development and where we want to see the development, and then reaping the benefits from it.
Yeah, and I think, Jared, you mentioned the track piece. Like, that's one of the things on editing the TIF on this recreational with the new Parks and Rec department for potential equipment for their pieces. And you see, to your point, Michelle, like, when I was reading the full TIFs, it's like, oh, this is the economic development strategy for the next decade. And I think the last time this was edited was like 2015, 2014.
It was before, I left at 15, it was done before then. So it's
and
pretty old.
I think the Moore Center debt is funded through the TIF. So the Moore Center is that building rehabilitation, that's the debt service is funded through the TIF on that. There's a fair amount of capital projects that were in there, and then there's, a mix of economic development staffing, programming, branding, and there's a bunch of things in there that really came to fruition, and a few things in there that's like you can spend up to this amount of money on these things, and we haven't ended up utilizing that. It wasn't. That's kind of what the redesign would be for. Okay, what's your current economic development needs funded through these resources, and with the debt service fall off, and also these are accruing more value too. So I think it's around 160,000 more value is being kicked off than was previously. So how do we decide strategically, not just, all right, let's spend, the council could spend, it's up to 2 million, I think on, branding, events, marketing. We could bring George Strait in here for one night only.
So, and this is where the planning and the council comes in and says, no.
But that would be like, we have that much leeway in events, branding, marketing in terms of the TIF, but we don't want to do that. There's, Parks and Recreation, Knowlton Park, or other pieces, we might want to expend those on capital improvement to Knowlton Park to encourage community investment and development as opposed to marketing and these other types of efforts. We might want to do it on new debt service for the track, or for infrastructure and water sewer needs for the Courthouse Road project. And so, there's surplus funds in there. We want to think strategically about it. We want to edit our TIF to the most aligned district as opposed to what's
There's not
currently there.
surplus funds in there.
What do you like to call it then?
It's just there are funds in the TIF fund, because there's no such thing as that, because then if you get surplus funds and you're just spending them, that becomes a slush fund. It's not. It's money that's in there unplanned.
Unallocated, I should say.
Unallocated.
Yeah.
Unallocated.
Sure.
Is much better.
Unallocated, there's a significant amount of additional unallocated funds, in the tune of like, I think $400,000 to $600,000 per year in unallocated. So last year, we allocated X amount. This year, there's an additional $600,000 that was not allocated, and we could either keep building that pot of money for something big. It could be like a grant match for the Village Partnership Initiative. That's a 10-to-1 match potentially that could be the $3 million that the city matches to a $30 million investment in our downtown, and let's start thinking about that. So in 5 years, school, these other pieces, really looking strategically at how those work together. And unallocated, not surplus.
Did that all
I've got
answer
to
your
go.
question?
I'm sorry, I'm
It
getting
did.
emails.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You guys have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you
How'd
all.
you like that lecture, huh? Sorry. Go.